MMO world, the 5th video, class systems and balance. Players love customization, right? And I'm not speaking of just customizing your character at the character creation screen or transmogging some gear. I'm speaking of customization when it comes to classes and builds. So, how boring would it be if, I don't know, you picked a warrior and you leveled the warrior to max, and you had skills you were getting along the way. So you hit max level, and that's it. So now you have a max level warrior, and the max level warrior standing next to you is exactly the same. You have the same skills as he does, and he might look different because he made his character look a little different. He has different transmogged gear or whatever he may be wearing. That's it. That's the only difference, is how you look. But down to your abilities, when you look at your abilities, they're exactly the same to the T. Pretty boring, right? This is why a talent system is important. Talent systems provide a good amount of customization for players, you know? It's something that makes me different from every other player of the same class out in the world. So when building a talent system for your game, we want to be sure that we have close to double the possible talent choices than we do points to acquire them. Because we don't want a talent system where we're like, well, you can pick everything eventually. Well, that defeats the purpose of the talent system. So, to clarify, if a class has 40 talent choices, we'd want about 20 points or so for the player to use. This would provide a fair amount of customization, but in my opinion, it's not enough. If we go the World of Warcraft route and add 2 more talent trees to the character, we have something like, I don't know, maybe like 60 points and 120 possible talents. That's not bad, but we could certainly expand on this a bit more. Unfortunately for WoW, they decided to ruin their talent system recently. I think it was like maybe the last expansion? I don't remember. But they went backwards with that and totally screwed their talent system, in my opinion. So, how about those class systems that allow you to, like, create your own class? You know, you pick 3 subclasses and they make your final class. It's cool, it offers a fair amount of customization. However, a big however, it can make for an extremely unbalanced game because you now have to balance for every possible class combination. Now, it could be like a daunting task for devs to do, and it could be an impossible task. So, how would it be impossible, you might ask? Well, let's say you pick a class, right? You have 4 choices, 4 classes you're looking at. You have A, B, C, and D, and you're like, what should I pick? I'm gonna pick A, B, D. You made your class A, B, D, right? And it's a perfectly balanced class. Someone else picks A, C, D, right? So A, B, D, A, C, D. Now the devs realize that something's broken in D, and they nerf it a bit. So A, C, D is now pretty much where it's at. But you had A, B, D. You just got hit with a nerf bat. That's it. Your class just got nerfed pretty much unintentionally. I'm not going to say the devs aren't going to know they're nerfing you. They know, but they have no choice because they got to nerf this ACD class. Well, everybody that's using D is now going to get hit with that, you know? It's not good. It makes for a system that's very, very hard for developers to fine-tune and balance. Me, personally, I look at balance so closely, probably a lot closer than others may, so it bothers me, and I think about that stuff. What could I do to make this class more balanced? What should I do? And if you're met with a system like that, a lot of the times is I can't do anything. If I do anything to this, it's going to screw everything else up. So that's why I feel that we should have those classes separate. You know, a warrior's too strong, let's look at that warrior. A rogue's too strong, let's look at the rogues. You know, it's not something that you have to tie to something else and you're going to unintentionally nerf. So that's why I feel, while the systems are cool, we should keep them separate, keep the classes separate, and you could have a better balanced game if you go with that route. So, I personally like playing melee classes, and sadly, they usually get the shit end of the stick. Usually when it comes to PvE they do, and sometimes in PvP as well. So, range classes almost always benefit from increased DPS over melee, due to the fact that they avoid more mechanics. Like, they don't even have to worry about a lot of the mechanics in a boss fight, because a lot of it's centered around the melee's getting hit with a bunch of stuff, they don't have to worry about it, so they get to do extra DPS. And in large-scale PvP, a lot of the times melee classes get killed before they even get in there. Maybe you got 50 on 50, and 5 melee run up there, well, they're dead. They're just going to get blown up. Now you can argue, well, that's not a good strategy, why are the 5 melee going in there? I agree with you, but if 5 range went in there, they'd be a lot less likely to be killed because they can back up and escape whatever they might have to do. But when a melee commits to that fight, they're in there. They're going to get blown up, you know? So that's something to think about. So I feel melee should do a little more damage than a range character should. And usually that's the case. Like an archer shooting a warrior of some sort, and the warrior's in heavy armor, they're doing a little bit of damage, you know, ticking them away, hitting them, and then the melee closes the gap, and all of a sudden some big damage happens on the archer. That's pretty much how it should be, because, you know, you have light armor on the archer, or leather, whatever they may be wearing, so they should be taking a fair amount of damage when they close the gap. The problem usually is that, the gap closers and the escapes. If we look at those, it's like, well, how many gap closers does the melee have? What's the cooldowns like? What are the costs like? How many escapes does the range have? What's the cooldowns like? What's the costs? And then you gotta look at the range of their abilities. Well, if the archer can snipe you at 40 yards, and he could do it while moving maybe, and your gap closer's at 25 yards as a melee, he can hit you a lot while backing up melee, not melee, while backing up while sniping you, or strafing, he can keep shooting at you, you know? And you can maybe you never close that gap to even be able to use your charge. That's a balance issue. That's something that's got to be addressed. You got to think about that stuff. Well, maybe he's got a sprint and he can close the gap a little bit to get within range for his charge. So he has a semi-gap closer and then like a hard gap closer, you know, the charge to put him there. So it's something to think about when you're balancing the two classes, and hopefully melee gets some love in some of the future MMOs we're looking at. So, speaking of balance, I've seen it destroy MMOs when they don't pay attention to it. I know I touched on Warhammer Online in a previous video, but I'm going to go into some details here, alright? So, Warhammer Online had a very risky class system, and it completely failed and blew up in their face. It destroyed their game. 2 factions, right? We have 2 factions, and they each have different classes, meaning that to be a specific class, you'd have to be this race on this faction. So if you were a Black Orc, you have to be on the side of Destruction. If you want to be an Ironbreaker, you have to be on the side of Order. Now this sounds cool on paper, but when you're in game, you will quickly see how big of a failure this was. MMO balance is so extremely important with a system that places unique classes on each faction. So remember the Shaman vs Paladin complaints in WoW? Yeah, okay. Well, imagine that on every class in the game. Warhammer Online was so broken, it made one faction nearly unbeatable. Order had a class called Bright Wizard. This class could instant cast AoEs that would do more damage than the single target casts of the opposing class. Sorcerer, right? So we have Bright Wizard and Sorcerer on opposing factions. Bright Wizard would do more damage AoE instant than the Sorcerer would do single target cast time. I don't know what the devs were thinking when they designed this, but it was clear that their love was for the Order faction and not Destruction. So Warhammer Online failed miserably, and a large reason for that was the balance system. This is why I personally disagree with unique classes on each faction. It does not create a well-balanced game. You guys remember any balanced Nightmare stories that you may want to share? Throw it up in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Anyway, feel free to subscribe, like, follow, whatever the hell we do with this shit nowadays. And as always, thanks for watching.